Metroid fans, and welcome back to the Omega Metroid podcast, your number one source for Metroid things, or not, but it's on a weekly basis, and thank you for joining us once again. We're here to talk about some Metroid, and I'm here once again with my man Doom, twice in a row. It's been two of us holding it down. Andy, unfortunately, can't be with us here tonight, so it's the nice Dak Doom duo, back at it again. Doom, how you doing?
Pretty alright, Dak. I just watched the new Beavis and Butthead movie that came to Paramount Plus, and it was awesome. It's kind of sad that that's a better deal on Paramount Plus than the Halo show. It's kind of pathetic, actually, when you really think about it, but nonetheless, this new Beavis and Butthead movie, it's fantastic. If you're a fan of Beavis and Butthead, it's going to be right at home. I'm a huge Mike Judge fan, and, he just always finds... somehow, despite the fact that these characters never change, always finds all of these new and hilarious, yet relevant scenarios to put these characters in, and it's just always a good time. And so, definitely, if you have Paramount Plus, and if you're a fan of Beavis and Butthead, absolutely, this is a must-see. And then also, The Boys Season 3 is just absolutely insane. If you're already a Boys fan, you already know that, though, but, absolutely, gotta watch The Boys. This is one of those few shows that I'd actually recommend getting an Amazon Prime subscription just solely to watch the show, because it's honestly that good. But otherwise, what? How are you doing, Dak? Any cool games or TV shows, movies that you've had a chance to indulge in lately?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to talk about Beavis and Butthead. And so it was funny to hear that, because I feel like I haven't heard someone even say those names out loud in such a long time. But yeah, I did hear that came out recently. I haven't gotten the chance to watch it, but I will certainly make some time. I'm just about wrapping up my rewatch of seasons 1 through 4 of Game of Thrones. I feel like I'm going to end at the end of season 4, so I'm just nearly at the end of that season and going to wrap things up after that. Definitely want to get into The Boys, because I started watching it when it first came out, and I don't know why, I just didn't stick with it, but now it's gone on several seasons. It can't be that bad. Everyone's been talking about it, and I'm like, you know what? I'll check it out. I'll put some time into it. I have actually been watching other things on Amazon. I mean, not recently, but like Amazon Prime Video has like The Expanse, which is one of my favorite shows in recent years. So that's something that I had been watching, I would say, last year, later last year, earlier this year, and that's really good too. So another show worth watching on that platform as well. And then I'm also rewatching Stranger Things, because the end of the current season 4, will be dropping this weekend on, I believe, July 1st or July 2nd. So that's happening very, very soon. I'm a big Stranger Things fan. I'm currently rewatching that with a couple of friends. I believe we're somewhere in season 2. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I'll be able to finish that rewatch by the time the new episodes come out, but I'm all up to date, so it's fine. So yeah, I'm really enjoying Stranger Things. Really good show, and I thought season 4 has been pretty solid. So yeah, enjoying some Stranger Things, enjoying some Game of Thrones. Gotta get into The Boys. Yeah, that's where I'm at for shows. I'm trying to think of any. I mean, I saw Top Gun a couple weekends ago. That was pretty good. Have you seen that?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not really much of a Top Gun fan. I thought the first film was okay. I gotta say though, man, I was blown away by Top Gun Maverick. That absolutely blew out my expectations completely. I had an absolute blast, and I personally, I think this is an absolute must-see theatrical experience just for the sound design alone. That final act is so intense and well directed. And again, I'm not even a Tom Cruise fan. Like Tom Cruise is a person, individual, but just putting all that aside, just as someone who loves film, this is just absolutely a must-see for the summer.
Tom Cruise, I think, unequivocally is crazy, right?
Without question.
Dude is insane. But I have to say the whole gig he's got going on, where he makes his own movies and he's the leading guy and he's perfect and he gets the girl and he saves the day. He literally saves the day he's got a good gig going on for him. I have to respect that in some way. Like he's figured out the formula, so for better or worse. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. These days when I go to the theaters, I really only see things in IMAX. So, I saw Dune in IMAX, the Batman, Spider-Man. I saw Doctor Strange. Obviously, I'm going to see Top Gun in IMAX as well. And yeah, that is a movie you have to see in theaters, I think. If you can see it in IMAX, definitely do so. really well done, really well shot. It's exciting. It's it's a predictable movie. You're not really gonna be, I think, surprised by anything, but I think that's fine. It's very much a turn your brain off and just kind of enjoy the ride kind of movie. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. Do I need to like rewatch it again immediately? Probably not, but everyone's seeing it for good reason because it's a pretty enjoyable movie, and I think it just crossed like $1 billion like worldwide, or even more than that. I'm sure I'm way off.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's made a
it's the
crazy
first
amount of
film.
money.
Yeah, it's the first film in 2022 to hit $1 billion, which is a pretty cool mark to hit for sure. I think it's the highest grossing film of Cruise's career as well. So I'm sure
It is.
he's not sad about that.
Yeah, and it does have a shirtless boys on the beach, guys on the beach kind of scene playing with the boys, like that's there, and I would have been really, I guess disappointed if it wasn't in the movie. So
Gotta
yeah,
have the fan
definitely worth
service.
it. You gotta have the fan service. Everyone wants that. So I was, and what was crazy too is I think the movie came out at the mid or end of May, and when I went to go see it, it had been about like a month, maybe like 3 weeks, 4 weeks into like it being in theaters, and the theater was still packed. Like everyone's still seeing it. It's not one of those things where like everyone goes and sees it like only the first or second week. Like people are still packing in. There were very few seats at my viewing a couple weeks ago, so I wouldn't be surprised if that trend continues. But
It's not like a comic book film where like everyone wants to see it the first weekend so they can get the spoilers out of
yeah,
the way. It's one of those movies that's like keeping up
exactly.
its pace because of the word of mouth, which I think it's really cool because you don't see a lot of that anymore.
No, I 100% agree. And yeah, I saw it on the 17th, so just under a week and a half ago, and it was pretty packed. But enough about movies and TV. We're already at the 8 minute mark almost, I think, or close to it. And
Almost like we're stalling.
no, I mean, I personally, I don't know about you, but I like to kind of just get into it and ease into some Metroid. But it's always good to see what everyone's into and see what everyone's doing. Of course, before we do jump into some Metroid, if you live in the United States, just horrible news, really, the past few days. Supreme Court making an absolutely awful decision with Roe versus Wade, and certainly keeping people who are affected by that, which honestly, really everyone is affected by that, but certainly there are more so some than others, and keeping those people not only in our thoughts, but certainly finding ways to be proactive and see what we can do to help those people out. So, certainly support everyone that you can who has, reproductive needs. Supporting reproductive rights is important. And we were happy to see that there was a lot of a positive response to our tweet that we had put out about that. This is certainly a place for you if you are, someone who supports and believes in reproductive rights. If you don't, get out, because this is not the place for you. So yeah, that's how I feel on that, and unfortunately that's how things have gone, and hopefully that won't be a trend, but we'll have to see these days. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately, this isn't the only decision as well. Obviously, this is like
Yes.
the overturning of the Roe v. Wade precedent is the big news item, but there's been other things like states being able to opt out of giving out your Miranda rights. I heard that's kind of important, so that's really unfortunate. And then in Clarence Thomas, who was one of the justices that voted to overturn it, in his majority opinion, he basically also hinted that stuff like gay marriage or married couples being able to buy contraceptives and other stuff, that a laundry list of items is also on the table to be overturned as well. So to put it in gamer terms, we took an L and a half this week. And that's really unfortunate, but we stand here at Omega Metroid with human rights.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too is that it might not end with this, but it also didn't start with this either. Like there has been a lot of, like you said, a lot of other decisions that have been made. They're certainly going to negatively impact a lot of people that live in this country, and it's certainly mindful of that. There are a lot of people that have been working against making against these horrible decisions for years now, if not longer, and it's been a long-standing battle for many of these communities, especially the LGBTQ plus community. So definitely something to keep in mind, and be mindful of everyone's path in life, but also we're doing our best to be mindful of that and keep that at the forefront of our minds. Because honestly, I know that gaming can be an escape for many people, and certainly it is for us to some degree and at times, but I think at times like these, it's important to not disconnect and detach yourself, especially if you have the privilege to do so. So certainly something that we wanted to at least comment on, and we're glad that we did, both here and over the weekend. And we'll see what happens next. Hopefully it's a positive change coming in the future. Like, hopefully there are positive changes coming in the future and not more like what we've just had. So we'll keep tabs on that for sure and do our best to see what we can do to support those certainly directly affected and otherwise, because like I said, this affects everybody. And I think when we kind of keep that into consideration, that we're all in this together and it isn't just some people, I mean, certainly again, more people are affected than others, but it's important not to disconnect, important, especially if you are privileged, to maybe not necessarily feel the effects of this immediately, to keep in mind those who do and see what you can to support.
Absolutely.
And now that that has been said, yes, now that that's been said, and I know, by the way, Andy 100% agrees with all of that, so if he was here, he'd be reiterating, if not more so, and we're happy for that as well. Now to jump back into the world of Metroid, the world of games, which all things considered does not seem as important, but that's what we're here to talk about, so we will. It is now time once again, this week, this month, this half year, this year, it is time for Metroid Prime HD rumors. I feel like we've been here so many times, Doom. It's happened again and again.
Well, I think before we talk about the rumors, I think there's a big piece of news that dropped that we got to talk about beforehand.
Oh, I know, but I know we got to talk about it beforehand, but the main thing we're talking about today, of course, which is everyone's been talking about in the Metroid world, are the rumors that once again Metroid Prime Remastered HD, whatever you want to call it, is going to be dropping. We'll get to what you just mentioned in a second. But we're back in the cycle. We're back in the rumor cycle. The rumor mill is churning. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about some Metroid Prime rumors and seeing how we feel about that. But yes, Doom, go ahead. There is something we do have to talk about beforehand.
We finally got the announcement. It's the announcement we've all been waiting for. We wondered, is it going to happen on the 15th? Is it going to be the 22nd? Is it just going to be a Xenoblade 3 Direct? No, we finally did it, guys. We got a Nintendo Direct partner showcase. And this is where the Seinfeld laugh track plays.
So by the time this episode comes out, that mini direct, the partner mini direct, whatever they're calling it, will have already aired. So we're not going to be doing any predictions because they're not going to be like the thing will have already happened by the time you listen to this. So that seems pretty moot. So that said, we've now had 2 directs announced without a main Nintendo Direct. We had the Xenoblade 3 Direct. Did that happen already? That happened.
Yeah,
right?
that was on
happened. Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yes, so that happened. Obviously, as you can tell, I didn't watch it, and I don't know if you did.
I did not.
I didn't. Okay, so that's not. We're not the Omega Xenoblade podcast, so we're not going to be talking about that. But hey, if you are a big Xenoblade fan, if you're looking forward to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I'm very happy for you. I hope that it was everything you wanted and more. And I know that game is very highly anticipated by many people out there, so I hope you enjoy it. But we're not going to be talking about that. And the partner direct. I mean, truthfully, we're probably going to get... I know we weren't going to do predictions, but we're probably going to get Mario & Rabbids Bayonetta, maybe. There's some leaks going around that I don't want to necessarily spoil anything. But again, this is going to be out already. It doesn't even matter, but I'm not expecting really too much from this. That said, I did discuss this a bit on the Discord earlier today, where I do think it's nice that these exist, right? And again, this is a thing where, like, if the main Nintendo Direct was already announced or already happened, I wouldn't even really care. And honestly, truthfully, I still don't really care, because especially all things considered, like, we'll get a Direct when we get it. But coming from growing up with Nintendo games, especially from like the Wii era or the GameCube era, like, hasn't been the main home for third-party games, right? Like, if you're gonna play those kinds of games, you play on your Xbox, your PlayStation, or your PC, or whatever it is. And especially back in the day, like, you did not play third-party games on Nintendo systems. Now that's shifted. Like, there's better third-party support than I think there really ever has been for a Nintendo console. They're, not only giving a lot of room for, like, AAA, or, like, I don't know if AA is a term, but, like, bigger third-party games, but also indie games as well, and showcasing them. So I think it's important, and I think it's great that has changed over time, that there has been a bigger and better home for third-party games and developers and better support for them for a Nintendo system, because really that has not been the case for majority of Nintendo's lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going off you, because I feel like you and I are pretty same in how we approach third party titles. Where because I want my third party titles to look, as graphically glorious as
Runnable.
possible, and because I like almost never play in portable mode. I think the last time I actually used my Switch in portable mode was I was playing Mario Odyssey on a plane trip like 3 or 4 years ago. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, the Xbox is my third party machine. I know for you it's primarily PC, and so like for us that's like
Yep.
where we're getting our third party goodness. But like you mentioned, there are a lot of Switch owners, who do want third party ports, whether it's just just the fun of having like a non-traditional series on Nintendo Switch like Doom, or whether they just want to take something on the go that they never would have been able to do before, like Skyrim, like and sure, you can do a Steam Deck with that for now, but it's more expensive, it's less entry level, and it's a lot bulkier too, so it's a lot less portable than Nintendo Switch. And so I still think it's really cool to see all these third parties coming to Switch. And I still think there's some cool announcements. Like we mentioned, Mario plus Rabbids and Bayonetta 3, those are Switch exclusives that I've been personally really looking forward to. So, I actually don't think that this. I know that in the past, during the pandemic, during the dark times, those partner showcases were the bane of our existence. And while this certainly isn't going to live up to a traditional direct or even a direct mini, I still think that there is. I still think that there is going to be some good that comes from this, and perhaps even some hype announcements. Maybe this is where we finally get GoldenEye. I'm not banking on it, but I mean
Yes.
it's technically third party. I'm just saying.
I would be super down for GoldenEye. I think it'd be a bit weird if it didn't show up at the Xbox showcase we had a couple weeks ago, but it did show up at this. But hey, weirder things have happened. So personally, I would love to see some new GoldenEye, and I would play it on the Switch. I do mostly play my Switch in docked mode, but I do bring it when I travel, and I like to dabble here and there. So more titles to play on that, the better, as long as they're running smoothly and not taking me out of the experience as a result of how it looks or how it runs. I'm totally cool with it. But I mean, there are a lot of people who might only own a Switch, right? Or they don't own, a PC or whatever it is, like to play a third party game. The Switch might be their only option. So to have more of that support is definitely great. But we'll find out what the Direct has in store for us tomorrow. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be tomorrow, if not after, but likely tomorrow. So it'll already have had happened. But as we're recording it now, it has not yet happened. So we don't know what's going to be in store for us. I guess we'll find out. And if it's anything interesting, I'm sure we'll be talking about it in the Discord. So you can totally join us, especially if you're excited about something that has been announced. That said, I've gotten that out of the way. Mini Partner Direct. We're hoping for a main Direct. And we were talking about this a little bit before the show, but what do you think this means for, directs and announcements for maybe the rest of the summer or rest of the year? Like, we haven't had an E3 season has kind of come and gone, right? Like, the Summer Games Fest is over. The main state of play, the Xbox showcase, all these things have happened, and we have not gotten a main Nintendo Direct. So what do you think? Like, what's up with that, man? What's up with that?
Well, yeah, it's quite a peculiar year, and as I mentioned before, this isn't like 2020 where the pandemic just started. Obviously, we're still in the pandemic, but it's not this brand new thing. It's this thing that we've adjusted to. We have vaccines now. People are more used to going out in public. We have systems in place to be able to manage all this now. So, obviously, that's not to say that there isn't an effect. We still have supply shortages and stuff like that. It's obviously still affecting the world. But I don't necessarily think it's the pandemic that's causing this alteration in Nintendo's plans, for lack of a better phrase. I think what is going on is a combination of Nintendo overplaying their hand early on and delays, particularly with Breath of the Wild 2, which that was supposed to be Nintendo's big game this year. That was going to be the big game that was going to carry everything else. Nintendo wanted to do that this year, but obviously that wasn't going to work out, and so they had to delay that. And I think that alone had a domino effect on the rest of Nintendo's schedule, and I think that is what's caused them to reshuffle this. And you look at a lot of the 2022 lineup and how far back some of it was released, like Splatoon 3, for example, which was introduced at the beginning of 2021, and something like that from like Sony would be like or Microsoft, that would be like an average day. But Nintendo very rarely, apart from 2017 when the Switch was just a brand new product on the shelf, Nintendo usually doesn't like to release or give new info on titles that far out in advance. And they did that a lot with their 2022 lineup. And as a result, we knew most of that lineup coming in. And so I think, I remember Andy and I were talking about this on an episode where it was just us, and we were wondering, like, what else could Nintendo have in store? Like, this year is already stacked, and now we know barely anything else to announce, as well as some delays. And so I think, yeah, that's pretty much kind of what's happening. And as a result, it's possible we might get a direct mini. I know that's something that one of Jeff Grubb's predictions right now, which we'll talk about that later with the Metroid Prime rumors. I also think it's possible we might just not get anything until the September Direct, whenever that happens. They might just roll everything out there, and we'll see what happens there. Dak, do you have any thoughts on all this?
That's actually not a bad point. We could just get a September Direct. At this point, this is kind of like how Nintendo can really play things. Like, as much as people are up in arms for a Xenoblade Direct, and they're sleeping because of a partner Direct, and they're mad at Nintendo because their real Direct hasn't been announced, the second it is announced, they'll forget all about that previously. They'll forget about how mad or bored or indifferent or irritated or whatever it is they were about not getting a Direct, and they'll be like, oh, awesome, can't wait for this Direct, right? So there's really no, like, almost pressure on Nintendo, I think, really, because when they have something to show, they'll show it. Like, people are going to... It's not like people aren't going to be excited to see it when it eventually pops out. So the onus is on people to just kind of wait. It's not really on them. And that makes it interesting because, yeah, maybe they just don't show anything through the summer. Maybe they just wait until they've got everything on lock in September. Here's this, and for the rest of the year into the next year, like, and they just kind of throw it at us. I could see that happening. I still could easily see them doing a Direct in, like, July, right? Like, we're so used to, like, the framework and structure of, like, E3 season and all these different things, but Nintendo plays by their own rules. They could easily decide to put out a Direct next week or the week after that, right? Like, there's really no way to, like, predict what they're going to do, because they never, I think, like, sit still on what they're going to do. It's always, like, unpredictable with them. It's always something different, and they're always kind of, marching to the beat of their own drum. So at one hand, I do think it is kind of likely that maybe they do wait. Maybe because they've, like you said, pulled the trigger a bit early on some things, that now they're like, you know what, we're going to really wait until we show stuff off, and we're going to, have this ready to go not too long after the Direct, and we'll do a September Direct, and then we'll have so much to show, and everyone will completely forget about it. But I don't know, it would kind of suck to wait the entire summer and not hear anything else about all these games. So I do think that we'll likely get something in July. I really don't think that, they just had the Xenoblade Direct. Now they're doing another Direct. Maybe they do another Direct. The things come in threes, man. That's kind of, I know it's not a real thing, but, like, things come in threes, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get that final big Direct for, like, this time of year. Not too far off. Maybe maybe we hear an announcement for that right after this Direct. So who knows? But I wouldn't count them out. I wouldn't be surprised either way.
Yeah, I'm certainly not counting out. I'm just listing, like, the possibilities that seem the most likely to me. And I feel like, and the thing is, I don't think that if we do get something in July, I don't think it's going to be like a traditional Direct. I think it will be more of a mini Direct. I don't think that mainline Direct is going to be in September, because that's typically when Nintendo starts talking about their early 2023 plans. I think that's when we're going to get the Breath of the Wild 2 blowout in September. I think that'll be a big focus then, but we'll get there. We'll get there when we get there. It's going to happen eventually,
Cool.
whether it's July or August. And folks, we're Metroid fans. We have the patience of a saint. I think we can wait a couple more months.
We really can. I mean, it's still been less than a year since Metroid Dread has come out, so to wait a little bit more for Metroid news, I think I'm totally okay with. I think we kind of, now that a Metroid game has come out and Dread has come out, like, maybe we kind of take that for granted, and now we're like, oh, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? But we just had Dread come out. We just, we're still eating pretty good, and we're pretty certain that we're going to be getting a new game soon anyway. It's just kind of a matter of time when it really drops and when it gets announced, when it drops and all that. So, but speaking of which, let's go into the main thing we want to talk about here. Is all the news, all the rage. Everyone's talking about it here today, and I wouldn't be surprised if they keep talking about it throughout the week. because once again, like I was talking about, Metroid Prime HD, Metroid Prime Remastered rumors are back in the news cycle. These articles need to get clicked. And what way better to get an article clicked on by putting an image of the Metroid Prime box art and putting Metroid Prime HD, Metroid Prime Remastered, coming out this time, coming out that time, coming out soon. It's here, it's on its way, it's in the works. It works every time. People click on it every time.
It's basically done.
And it's done. It's who you know. It's coming soon. Like it's. I've seen so many of these articles. I actually wish we had like a tally of every day in which a Metroid Prime HD rumor had been like reported on, because I feel like that tally has to be in the double digits now. Like, and I'm not even just, and that's not even including Metroid Prime Trilogy being ported to the Switch. You add those numbers on, you're definitely in the double digits. So we're here again, but today we had a slightly, I guess not slightly different, but we've had it come back into the news cycle. Doom, tell us a little bit about that. What's everyone been talking about today?
So Jeff Grubb, who's someone I've talked about on the podcast before, when inevitably talking about rumor talk, because yeah, it's, as you mentioned, this isn't far from the first time that a Metroid Prime rumor has come up, but this one I think is really interesting. One, because Jeff Grubb, for me personally, is a source that I trust. I'm not saying that any of our viewers should necessarily trust. One, because nobody has a 100% track record, But when it comes to like games leaks, for me personally, where I start to get iffy is with like anonymous accounts and stuff where they have to hide their online personas. Someone like Jeff Grubb, who's someone that actually works in the industry, he's a former Venture beat reporter, recently just moved like a week or two ago to a Giant Bomb, which is a very reputable outlet. And, and he has a very good track record on history. And I actually want to tally off, just a few of those recent stuff that he knocked out of the park, just to like give you a sense of like what he's gotten. So going back last year, about a month or two, maybe even 2 months before EA's little whatever their presentation is called, I can't remember, but he was predicting that there was going to be a Dead Space reboot, not a sequel. And this is very important because Dead Space fans, as you would know, if you've played the DLC for Dead Space 3, it ends on a major cliffhanger. And so if you're going to do a Dead Space rumor, common sense would tell you, like, oh, it's finally going to be a sequel to Dead Space 3 resolving that cliffhanger. Dead Space 4, no. Grubb was predicting from the beginning, no, this is, from the ground up, a reboot of the first game. And, obviously we know a year later now, Dead Space reboot is coming out in March in 2023. But I believe it's March. It's sometime early next year. But yeah. Let's go a bit more recent, though. So, everyone knows that I'm a big Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order fan. The game was a very big surprise hit for many players, including myself, and it was pretty much guaranteed that this game was going to get a sequel, just because of how successful it was, and just, how good the critic scores were. And so the game was officially announced, even though we already knew it was being worked on. It was officially announced earlier this year, but much like Breath of the Wild 2, it wasn't given a title. But about a week before Star Wars Celebration, Jeff Grubb revealed that the full title of the game was going to be Star Wars Jedi Survivor, and lo and behold, that was the title of the game, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. But let's do one more. Let's get a little more crazier. A prediction that you'd have to be absolutely insane to get right. Let's talk about Andy's favorite announcement, or at least I believe it was his favorite announcement of the Microsoft Showcase, which technically wasn't the announcement of a specific game, but the potential of a specific game, because Jeff Grubb was talking about a Hideo Kojima Xbox exclusive that would be likely announced at the Microsoft Showcase, and lo and behold, they got Hideo on camera with Phil Spencer. They revealed that they're working on an exclusive project. We don't know what that exclusive project is going to be, but it's happening. And so yeah, that's just a small sample. Again, I would encourage you to look at Jeff's track record, look at what he's done, and specifically look at his videos himself, and not articles that are reporting on him. So that way you're getting the full extent of what he's saying and what and not the telephone game that can derive when you start reading articles. And so that's for me why I personally, I have faith in Grubb. Again, doesn't mean that he's the gospel. I think he would agree with that of more than most people, in fact. You know, but I don't think he's doing it from a bad faith perspective. He's not grifting for clout. He's a guy that just genuinely loves his job and wants to report the news when he gets it. And so that's what I have to say on that. Dak, I don't know how familiar you are with like all the leaks and stuff like that, or even just Jeff Grubb and all that, and if you have any thoughts that you want to add on that before we continue on.
Well, I was going to say, I personally, I mean, all right, hold on, let me back up there. I was about to say I love leaks, but more so like I'm someone who just like, I can't help but look them up. So I'm always, especially coming from the Smash Bros. Community where like that's a big part of speculation before a new Smash game comes out. And getting involved in like what's been leaked and what's not, like I love surprises, but sometimes it's just enough for me to know something's existing and I'm eventually going to play it. And that's why I can't help myself to spoil myself on what's going to happen. So I'm always excited about that stuff. I don't know his entire track record, but I do know, I can not verify, but I know, I can confirm or at least agree with what you've just said. Like he's definitely been right on some things. And that's kind of the nature of leaks and really in any industry, right? Like you might have someone who has a really solid track record, maybe gets some things wrong here and there, but plans change, right? Like information might be given that conflicts with something else that maybe might become wrong because something changed over time and the information's old or whatever. But when you have someone who's gotten something right a few times consistently, like there's something to that. And like you said, it's not just like an anonymous account. It's not someone who's hiding behind, a random profile picture. Like there's someone who's not putting their career on the line, but they're attaching their name to it. And certainly, would it be the biggest thing if they were wrong? Like, would it ruin them? No, obviously not. But it's certainly something to say that you would, kind of report on that with some kind of veracity when you have, your name and face attached to it. So, I still take it with a grain of salt. There have been leaks that I've read and seen that have been, I was 100% convinced that would be right, and they weren't, regardless of who was attached to them. So I always, keep that in mind, but it's certainly worth noting because this whole news cycle on Metroid Prime HD and the remaster and the trilogy being ported and this and that have been around for a while. So it's not necessarily hard to like say Metroid Prime HD is coming to this holiday, because how many times have we heard that before? And it wasn't true. This could very well be the same thing, but it feels like the stars are starting to align a little bit here, and I'm hopeful, I'm excited, and I do think there is something to Jeff Grubb specifically, I guess, reporting on this. But at the same time, I don't believe his track record is 100% either. Is that because he's just been wrong, or because his information he got was wrong, or the information he got changed? Who knows? When it comes to leaking, you never know how that information, how they got it, or what had changed in between the time they got it and the time things get announced. So it's really something where you kind of just have to have faith, sometimes blind faith in them. But I do think it means something that someone of his stature and of his name would report on that. It's obviously being corroborated by a bunch of different people. And you had mentioned too, I think it's important to not just read a headline or read an article and be like, this is what they said. It's important to really go into what they literally said, what the person actually said on whatever video or podcast it was, and take their words verbatim and not just kind of what was paraphrased by a news outlet or an article headline or whatever it is. And I know you did that. You actually went back and listened and watched and listened to what he exactly said. So what did he exactly say on this matter?
Yeah, so this was taken from a live stream that premiered at about... So this was actually premiered at 8, which is about the same time that Nintendo actually announced the partner showcase, funny enough. But basically, he talked about, based on what he's heard, what he thinks is kind of going on with the summer showcase. And again, this wasn't him making any definitive statements, regarding all the summer direct plans, but just more based on what he's seen, where he is predicting things are going to go in that direction. And one of those things was potentially a July mini direct. But of course, we're here to talk about the Metroid Prime Remaster, as well as some other potentially exciting news. And I have some specific quotes from here taken from the live stream that he said on the matter. So first off, specifically talking about Metroid Prime Remaster, he says, quote, I can say that I've been told that pretty definitively that Metroid Prime Remastered is going to be one of their big holiday games. In the past, this is something I heard was in the works. They have something happening with the game now. Now it's like I've been told that their plans are to release that game this holiday, I think almost certainly to line up with the 20th anniversary in November. So this isn't, this is a very definitive claim right here. This is not ambiguous in the slightest. Jeff right here is saying Metroid Prime Remastered is happening this year and almost certainly going to be lining up with the anniversary. And it's supposed to be one of the big holiday titles. Kind of extrapolating from that, I would imagine the other big one is going to be the Pokemon games, which I would assume also would come out in November. So, kind of going off that quote, do you have maybe anything to add to that, Dak?
Well, I mean, obviously, very excited about that. And if that is true that it would be going with the anniversary, that means we'd be getting it November 18th, right? Like we'd be getting it in November, it would be a holiday game. And this kind of lines up with what we've said. I mean, I've said this on the show before, is that I think we're going to get Metroid Prime 4 next year at the holiday next year, and Metroid Prime HD is going to be coming out this holiday. So that lines up perfectly with that. And it's interesting now that we've gone from it's in the works or whatever to like this is what they're doing, this is definitely happening, and it's going to be a big game for them. And that's certainly very exciting for me, because as much as we're big Metroid Prime fans here, and it's a game that has been critically acclaimed, it's still not a game that everyone's played, right? Like it's it's only sold so many millions of units. Like it's not a crazy sold game in the grand scheme of things. So to have it ultimately re-released on the Switch would be crazy, especially in a remastered fashion. But this sounds a lot more concrete to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And and later I didn't record a quote from this, but I feel like we've all assumed this from the rumor, but Grubb here also specifically makes a point to note that this is just the first game, that this release would only include Metroid Prime 1, not 2 and 3, but we'll talk about 2 and 3 in a sec. But what are we expecting from this remaster? Because personally, with the way that it's being described, this sounds not like a typical Nintendo port job. We've seen recently with stuff like Super Mario 3D All Stars or Skyward Sword HD, which while they are definitely upgrades, like if you compare them side by side with the original game's footage, they're definitely upgrades. And honestly, in the case of Super Mario Galaxy, like I don't even think you need to do anything else. Like just Mario Galaxy in 1080p is perfect as far as I'm concerned. But from how Metroid Prime Remaster is being described, this sounds like a very ambitious project, and I don't think this is going to be one of those, oh, it's going to look how you remember it looking. No, I think this is going to look close to, if not a modern Switch title. I know we were talking about in the Discord, and this is personally my own speculation, so this is not what Grubb is saying, just to be very clear. This is my own personal speculation going off what he's saying, is I kind of created this little spectrum between Wind Waker HD and Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, where here's two examples of remastered games that kind of go above and beyond that typical Nintendo port job, with Xenoblade not quite looking like a modern game, but still very much looking far above the original, and then something like Wind Waker HD, which just straight up looks like a modern game. Even today, almost 10 years later, that remake is absolutely phenomenal. And I personally think that Prime Remaster is going to fit somewhere on that spectrum. How close to Xenoblade or Wind Waker, though, that I'm not entirely sure on. What about you, Dak?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because we did discuss this in the Discord previously, and I kind of had my thoughts there where there might be a spectrum between those two games, but like obviously a big reason why Wind Waker can still look so good in the modern age, because it was very stylized, right? It wasn't kind of trying to go for a more quote unquote realistic look, or not having a particular artistic style, so it doesn't seem like it's so stuck in the time period it came out in. And then again, yeah, like Wind Waker HD came out 10 years ago, which is wild to me, and it still looks great. But it's again very much because of its style. Metroid Prime has a style to it, but it's not like artistically very stylistic in the way that we would think of a Wind Waker or something like that, where it has that cell shaded look to it, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it's evoking of a particular time period. It could have come out now these days, right?
Yeah, Prime is more. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, because Prime is more of like a stylized realism, whereas Wind Waker is just like straight up like cartoony.
Exactly. Yeah. So my thing is that this is why I didn't want just a straight up port of the trilogy to the Switch, because as much as Metroid Prime, Metroid Prime 2, Metroid Prime 3 still look good, they're still GameCube and early GameCube Wii games. Like, they definitely look dated to an extent, especially with other offerings in the same genre in 2022, in the 2020s, even in the late 2010s, right? Like, there's so much advancement that's happened graphically for these types of games, and just games overall, that to not get a full remaster graphically and visually for Metroid Prime, I think would be a big miss. And we've discussed that on the show before. I think it'll be a pretty substantial upgrade for Metroid Prime. I don't think it's just going to be an HD where it looks a little smoother, a little crisper, and it's in a better resolution. I do think that they're going to be going for new models, new effects. Like, it's really going to look like a brand new game, and that's what I'm very excited about. That's really all I want from it, aside from having dual analog controls. Like, I don't, Andy's of the mind, and I hate to, use his own words against him here, but this is what he said, so I'm quoting him. But like, he wants, maybe a new area, new content, all that kind of stuff, like additions, bonuses to the game outside of an upgraded visual look and new controls. I personally don't need that. I think Metroid Prime is one of the best games ever, and really the only thing that holds it back as a game are the controls. Once you fix that, and then you give it a nice little, polish, and you make it look better, introduce some new models, all that kind of stuff, that's all you need. It looks perfect. Would I be welcome to a new area or a post-credits mission or anything like that? Absolutely. That would be incredible, but that would exceed my expectations. Expectations-wise, I think getting the visual overhaul and the new controls is what's critical and what's important. Not just for me as a Metroid Prime fan, but to bring in new players as well, because the original controls, or even like just being limited to the motion controls of the trilogy, I don't think will make the game as accessible to new players as some might think. But I think having the ability to play with the regular dual analog controls or with the gyro, and maybe work in some motion controls as an option as well, is the best way to get people into it. And then making the game look beautiful, eye-catching, just awe-inspiring, and really something that takes your breath away for a Switch game. That's what brings people in as well, as opposed to just porting the game over. So I think that also is a big reason why. Another reason why I feel that way is because of what Grubb had said. Where like, this is going to be one of their big holiday games, going to line up with the 20th anniversary. I don't think they would just do a port or just a kind of HD upgrade to it. I really do think they're rebuilding the game from the ground up. And we've said this on the show where like there were in a previous rumor news cycle, there was some talk of how. Either that or maybe one of the developers said this. I don't remember, but I remember we were talking about how like Metroid Prime HD or Remaster might even came into existence by the Retro Studios team going back to Metroid Prime and working on Metroid Prime again as like a warm-up and test to eventually start working on Metroid Prime 4. And if that's the case, I would imagine that they really rebuilt the game from the ground up, because otherwise, what are they really, just polishing the game, I don't think is going to be very effective for them to really relearn how to do Metroid Prime again. But if they're rebuilding the game and they're creating a whole new thing, that to me would make more sense for them using it as a means to get back into developing Metroid Prime and getting ready for Metroid Prime 4. So that's what I'm really hopeful for. I think that's how it's going to go.
Well, going off that, not only would it make sense for them, but I think it also makes sense for for the Switch base as well, because Metroid Prime Remaster, this is a good way to give a taste of like what to expect from Metroid Prime 4, especially with these potential dual analog controls, because I think we both agree that that's going to be something that's very prominent both in this remake and Metroid Prime 4's standardized FPS controls. For that are built for like a regular controller. I do think there's also going to be motion controls, implemented similar to Prime 3 and the Prime trilogy as well, but I think it's going to focus on those dual analog controls, kind of like with what we saw with Skyward Sword HD.
Yeah, I know. I 100% agree. And I think that's really important to go like start out with your heart, like your biggest, your strongest foot forward to reintroduce people to Metroid Prime. Like, Metroid Prime is a completely different beast than Metroid Dread. Like, Metroid Dread is awesome and it's a great game, and I think it has really revitalized the franchise in a great way. And a lot of people really took to it. But Metroid Prime, I think, is where we really start to see things shift for the franchise, and you really start to see it become even more mainstream. And I think that's important for them to have those upgraded visuals and make it look really like a new modern game, not just a remake or an HD, upgrade, but a new game. So maybe we do get a little bit of new content, a little bit of add-ons to it. Honestly, I wouldn't be against it. So I'm excited about that. And I believe Grubb also mentioned Metroid Prime 2 and 3 to an extent. Is that correct?
Yes. So that's the next big part of this that we can segue into now. So during the live stream, I was there well after it was recorded. After all the articles were written up, so I pretty much knew what to expect. But if you were watching that live stream, you would have think that would be the big scoop. But there was more. So after that first quote I give, Jeff Grubb gives his personal thoughts and all that, and then he transitions into this next paragraph. And again, this is quoted in context, so this is some really interesting stuff right here. Quote, I think this begs the question, though, what about Metroid Prime 2 and 3? Well, the other scoop here is that those games are also coming. They're also pretty much done, it sounds like, but Nintendo, being Nintendo, is going to hold on to them and will likely drop them later along the road. However Nintendo decides in what order to release their games, they're going to do that, but they're going to do it separately, it sounds like. And Metroid Prime 1, from my understanding, that it's going to be like a big remaster treatment, and then Metroid Prime 2 and Metroid Prime 3 are probably getting updated controls and things like that, but they're not getting quite the same overhaul that Metroid Prime 1 is getting. So, Dak, my interpretation from that quote is, pretty verbatim. Jeff Grubb is saying, for sure, 2 and 3 are coming eventually at some point. There isn't really a release window, but it sounds like sometime in the near future. That's just me building my own personal interpretations off that. And very importantly, as Grubb mentions, it doesn't sound like these two games are going to be getting quite the same visual overhauls as Prime 1, but we'll still be getting stuff like, those dual analog controls. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. Or were you going to say something?
I'm just going to say I feel very vindicated because I feel like I've literally said this on the show before. Give me remastered Metroid Prime, and then you can just give me updated controls and maybe a little bit of polish on 2 and 3, and we're good to go. So, like, this is what I've predicted on the show before, and now to hear him and hear him say this and read that he has said this, I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense. And that's why I was thinking that, because it does make sense to me. Like, you don't need to, I don't think you need to remaster. I mean, obviously, it would be great if you remastered from the ground up all 3 games. But when you're trying to bring new people into the series, like, not every casual gamer, or maybe even Metroid fan, only the most diehard, dedicated Metroid fans, I think, would play all 3 games. You want to give them a really good at least one game, and then the 2 and 3 would be a bonus, I think. And I also believe, and we talked about this on the show before, Metroid Prime 4, I think, might be more in line with, like, what Metroid Prime was, right? Even though it's likely going to be a sequel to 3, it feels like thematically, maybe even aesthetically, will be in line with Metroid Prime. So it makes sense to remake Metroid Prime from the ground up and give it the biggest overhaul. But Metroid Prime 2 and Metroid Prime 3, I think that's an added bonus. I think that's icing on the cake. A lot of people, especially new Metroid fans, probably won't play all 3. They probably just will play Metroid Prime and then wait for Metroid Prime 4. You don't want to necessarily overwhelm them with too many games, but still give them the option to get in on the entire trilogy so they understand what's happening and get the whole experience, because obviously it's one of the best trilogies in gaming created of all time. But this makes so much sense to me, and this is again why I didn't want just the trilogy to get ported and all of them just to get, a little bit updated controls and things like that. Give Metroid Prime that treatment. Obviously, yes, it would be ideal if all 3 did, but if we're not going to get all 3, at least give it a 1 and then release 2 and 3 in some degree. Who knows? Maybe they'll add 2 and 3 to the Metroid Prime remaster as like free DLC, or maybe it'll be packed in with Metroid Prime 4. Like, that's all a possibility. So I'm excited for this because, again, give me more Metroid Prime, and 2 and 3 being on the Switch as well, and then we have 4 Metroid Prime games on the Switch. That's awesome. That sounds great to me.
So you actually brought up something that I really want to talk about, and I'll get into my thoughts on 2 and 3 in a second. But from the perspective of new fans, you mentioned the potential of a trilogy overwhelming them, and I was very curious about this as well. So I did a little. I don't want to say this is like a full like data doc, because by all means it is not. This is not indicative of anything. These are just some interesting findings that I found and asked around about, but it's mostly anecdotal evidence, mostly stuff like that. But the first part of this is there's a podcast I listened to called Redirect, and they're basically like a Nintendo themed channel that talks about Nintendo news. And the two hosts on there, Metroid Dread is their very first Metroid game, so they're very casual fans. They're brand new to the series. They have no context other than Metroid Dread. Maybe the first hour or two of maybe an occasional game here and there. And so I actually asked them on their most recent podcast about what their thoughts were on a Prime remaster versus a Prime trilogy, or if they would rather it just be the bare bones originals, or if they wanted them rebuilt from the ground up. And both of them were pretty much in agreement that they would prefer if this Prime remaster rumor is correct, for the reason that you mentioned, that as cool as 3 games would be, their backlogs are already insane, and adding one game is significantly less overwhelming than adding 3 games. And so while I'm sure all of us Metroid fans, certainly myself, I would love to have all these titles bundled together, I do think that this is the smart marketing decision to make, to just focus all of your energy on one title and let that title speak for itself, which, considering how often this title appears in, greatest games of all times lists, I'm more than confident that it can do just that. And then something else that I wanted to look at as well. So this is an example of one specific remastered collection. Again, this isn't necessarily a pattern just because we're only looking at one other example, and there's also a bunch of other factors at play here. But I am a Crash Bandicoot fan. I love the Crash Bandicoot series, and I was hyped in 2016 when at Sony's press conference they announced that Crash was coming back with the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy. It released the following year in 2017. It was exclusive for the first year on PS4 before releasing on PC, Xbox, and Switch. Dak, do you want to know how much copies that this Insane Trilogy sold?
Yeah, I would love to know. How many?
So, the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy sold 2 million copies in its first year alone, and keep in mind that it was a PS4 exclusive at the time, and after that, in its total, as of 2019, it sold 10 million copies. 10 million copies. That is absolutely insane, if you will, for a Crash game, for any game, frankly. Now, for me, as a Crash fan, what I was even more hyped about was when Crash Bandicoot 4 was announced. Finally, we were getting a brand new original Crash game, and it was going back to the basic roots of that original Naughty Dog trilogy. And as someone who's played it now, I can honestly say that this is my personal favorite. Of the 4 games, Crash Bandicoot 4 is by far my favorite of it. I'm not going to get too much into that now, because while I personally was super hyped for Crash Bandicoot 4, Dak, do you want to know how much Crash Bandicoot 4 has sold to this day?
Yeah, let me know. How much?
Well, Dak, we don't know, because Activision hasn't posted that sales data for Crash Bandicoot 4, but what we do know is that in its first month, it sold 402,000 digital downloads. And that's all we know about Crash Bandicoot's 4 sales data. So, while obviously we don't have any definitive proof going, I think it's safe to say that Crash Bandicoot 4 didn't quite live up to the sales expectations that trilogy set. And so, again, this is not indicative of every single game series that gets a remastered trilogy before getting a brand new entry. This is one example. It doesn't mean anything. But there is a precedent set there that after you give 3 games in one package, and actually in the case of Insane Trilogy, it was also $20 off too. See, that is important context to keep in mind. So the Insane Trilogy, 3 games for $40, Crash Bandicoot 4, 1 game for $60. Keep that in mind. But still, that's a significant drop-off likely in sales data. And so, you keep that in context with Metroid, which, Metroid was never as big as Crash was. Crash used to be a console mascot, before it fell off and then kind of got a resurgence. Metroid, the closest it's gotten to that was Metroid Prime, but even then, it was never. That one title was like a highlight of the GameCube, but Samus was never like the mascot of the GameCube. And so,
Right.
yeah, that's just something that I wanted to point out in regards to that. And so I do think ultimately that this is the right decision to go, even though, again, I would personally prefer a trilogy. Ultimately, I think this is the right decision. Do these piecemeal, one at a time, space them out before Metroid Prime 4. And plus, it makes the wait for Metroid Prime 4 less daunting, because every day, we're checking our stopwatches, waiting for the day we're going to see more footage. But, you scooch some more Metroid titles in there, and obviously, they're games we've played before, but they look a little prettier. And it's always a good excuse to bust out the Nintendo Switch and revisit these titles that some of us haven't even played in years, and it's a good excuse for newcomers to get that much more introduced in the series. Anyways, that was a long. Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Wrap it up.
Anyways, yeah, I was just gonna say that was my long-winded rant.
Yes.
On all that, I would like to hear your thoughts before I go and talk about my actual thoughts on how those 2 and 3 could go. Yeah, I want to hear your actual thoughts on all that. Well, sorry for the great wall of text.
No, it's good. I mean, I'm as excited as you are for any kind of new Metroid Prime, but I think the salient point of what you're making is it's important not to oversaturate, right? Like if you release Metroid Prime, you release Metroid Prime 2, you release Metroid Prime 3, no matter how good Metroid Prime 4 is, people might be, good on Metroid Prime, right? Like they've gotten 3 games, so they need a 4th, right? Especially people who might be uninitiated. So I think it is important to not necessarily oversaturate. Personally, I think it would be smart if they release, and this is again going back to what I've said previously, release Metroid Prime Remastered this year, holiday, release Metroid Prime 4 next holiday, and then maybe release 2 and 3 as like a free update, maybe right after that, right after like the initial big sales window comes out, you make it a free update or something like that, or maybe because I'm hesitant to say like maybe release 2 and 3 as a free update to the remaster in between Metroid Prime 4, because again, oversaturation. But if you release it as maybe like a free update, it's really only affecting people who already have Metroid Prime Remaster, right? And maybe it gets people thinking about that again and maybe want to get into it. If they missed it, they're like, all right, well, now I have a good reason to jump in. But I'd be wary about oversaturating. Would it make sense to do like Metroid Prime release and Metroid Prime 4 and then 2 and 3? I don't know. That kind of sounds weird to me, but marketing-wise, it kind of makes sense if you want to avoid that oversaturation and not have that negatively affect Metroid Prime 4. I think what is most important is to get people back into it with Metroid Prime Remaster, and mostly not even get people back into it, but get people excited for Metroid Prime and be like, wow, I need more. And then, instead of hitting them with 2 and 3, hit them with the big new release, the big new game, Metroid Prime 4. So we'll see. I think that oversaturation point is very important, and I think that is going to absolutely affect when we actually see 2 and 3 eventually release.
Yeah, for sure. Couldn't have said it better myself. And but yeah, I haven't had an opportunity to talk about 2 and 3 because I had to go on that long tangent about Crash. Yes. But I really think I really want to drive home that point though. But in regards to 2 and 3, with what you were talking about earlier, yeah, I totally agree. Prime 1 is of all the games, obviously Prime 1, it being the earliest title, it hasn't aged the best. It definitely could use, more of the remastered treatment. 2, I think, could still use some work, but even so, that game, despite only being 2 years after that first game, is such a leap in visual quality over that first game. The textures are much clearer. You have a lot less, fuzzies and jagged lines and stuff like that. And overall, that game just looks so much cleaner, even on 480p, let alone when you upscale it to 1080. So while I would like to see that game at least get some texture work, it's not the end of the world it doesn't. And then Prime 3, I was talking about Mario Galaxy where, on it, where you literally just need to upscale that to 1080 and just hands off after that. And I agree the same thing with Prime 3 to an extent. Prime 3, I think there are some changes that Prime 3 could use that are not necessarily visual related, but more under the hood. Like the only other visual improvement I would say Prime 3 needs is maybe to reduce some of that bloom lighting, because I think it really fogs up and oversaturates what is otherwise a really beautiful art direction in that game. But I think if there was one thing that I think Prime 3 absolutely has to have changed, aside from the dual analog controls, because I feel like that's a given, there's one thing that game absolutely needs change. It's those loading times, man. Those loading times in Prime 3 are so terrible. They disrupt the experience. And I'll be honest, right now, like I would give Prime 3 like a B. You give that game to me in 1080p, and you remove all those loading times, and you have all the rooms just opening up almost instantly like that, I think that alone would put the game to an A- for me. It's that huge of a change for me. And so that's really, of the improvements that 2 and 3 could use, I think that's, more important than any graphical improvements for either of those games.
I'm pretty with you there. I think the only other thing I'd maybe change for Prime 3 is Ridley's model, maybe. Um, I think I mean, Omega Ridley probably is what it is, though his animations are kind of goofy. I think it would be really cool if they just made him, like, in his Meta Ridley form in the beginning of the game, just make him look like, I mean, I guess he wouldn't look identical, because, like, they had to, I don't know, rebuild him again or resuscitate him again after Metroid Prime, but, like, I think if he looked a little bit more in line with how he looked in the first Metroid Prime, that probably makes some sense to me. Not a big thing, but I always remember that, I think it's that one Donkey video, or someone would just, like, you're, like, fighting him, the Omega Ridley version, and he just has this goofy, like, standing there animation. And if they redid that boss battle, maybe his model a little bit, I would be probably okay with that. But
I'm pretty sure that was Donkey. I vaguely remember that joke.
I think you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, like it looks like he's, I don't know. There was like a video of him like,
where he's clawing the air. Yeah.
yeah. Like that's when I think of Ridley and Metroid Prime 3, that's what my mind goes to, and I'd rather it not anymore. So I would totally be down with a new version of that animation, maybe, or maybe that model a little bit. It just looks so goofy to me. But yeah, I think really the biggest thing would be to kind of smooth things out, get rid of the jagged lines, get rid of some of that bloom, obviously improve the loading times, and give me some dual analog controls. That's what I care about the absolute most. But yeah, I think ultimately I would, again, if you could remaster them entirely, would be great. But if not, I think those are the important things to target.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, as I mentioned before, I think these will be great little breadcrumbs leading us to the holy grail that is Metroid Prime 4, which I don't know. I know you still think it's coming out in 2023. That was my prediction for a long time. I'm not as sure about that anymore. I think there's a possibility we could be seeing this in 2024, but that is a discussion for another time.
I'm willing, I mean, I'm not going to put money on it, but I'm still feeling very confident about a 2023 release. I mean, that puts it, 6 years after it was originally announced? 3 years or whatever, 4 years after it was rebooted? That's a lot of dang time. Like, they better have a game ready to go. Because by then, I'm going to be old. I want some new Metroid Prime. 2024... I mean, you could very well be right, and maybe that's why
Breath of the Wild 2 has been, if it does actually come out, like, in 2023, that'll be 6 years since the first game, and as far as we know, that game didn't have like a start from scratch reboot process 2 years in.
It might have, though. It might have, but that's since that game's release. When was Breath of the Wild 2 announced?
I'm just saying though, like, it might be different circumstances at play.
No, you're definitely right. As far as we know, there wasn't a major change like that, but it remains to be seen. Who knows? Maybe by the time we're recording the next episode of the show, we'll have some additional details on what's happening with Metroid Prime HD, with a Metroid Prime Remaster, with the release of 2 and 3 potentially. Jeff Grubb apparently was also saying that we probably won't hear about this tomorrow, by the time this episode comes out, which makes sense to partner, kind of direct, which seems to imply third-party games. But if you Google search Retro Studios on Google, it says Retro Studios, a Nintendo game development partner, so it wouldn't be incorrect to see a Retro Studios game there. I don't think it's going to happen, though.
They specifically, in Nintendo's tweet, they specifically mentioned that they're going to show third-party games in the Direct. They made it very clear.
Okay.
As much as I would love to see Samus just pile drive that Direct out of nowhere, I think we're just going to wait a little bit longer, but it's just a little bit longer, Metroid fans.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think it'll be that much longer until we hear some kind of Metroid Prime news whatsoever. But I think at this point we have said our piece and then some, because we weren't even anticipating talking about it for this long, but then we went on these really long-winded discussions and monologues about Metroid Prime.
Y'all should really play Crash Bandicoot 4. That game is wonderful, y'all. It deserves more love.
Yeah, there's a lot of great games out there. Crash Bandicoot, certainly one of them, and hopefully a new Metroid Prime game will also join those ranks. But it remains to be seen. We'll see what happens with this mini direct. We'll see what happens with these rumors. Will they just, will they come true, or will they go belly up like all the previous rumors? I guess we'll find out soon. But with that said, we've talked a bunch of Metroid Prime. We talked a bunch today, man. This is clocking in a lot longer than I was expecting it to. And if you stuck with us this entire episode, well, congratulations. We really appreciate you for hanging out. And we appreciate you for being a fan of the podcast. Thank you so much for checking us out. We hope you enjoy the show. Hopefully we'll have Andy back soon to get the Dream Team all back together. It has literally been now over 2 months since I've done the show with Andy. And I thought it was going to be, actually it's been longer than that. But I thought he was going to be back these past couple weeks. He hasn't been, unfortunately.
That's why he's doing well. Dude, that's why we haven't gotten any Metroid announcements. They're waiting for us all to get the band back together.
That's true. I appreciate that they respect us and want that for us. So I hope that's the case.
They respect the grind.
We'll find out what's coming up. Yeah, they respect the grind for sure. I believe this will be episode 119, which is crazy. We started the show back in early 2020, and look how far we've come. But thank you all of you for checking us out. Thank you for listening. If you're still sticking with us, hope you enjoyed the show and have been enjoying the episodes recently and throughout the game or the show's timeline and the game's franchise timeline too. You can check us out on Omega Metroid Pod on Twitter and, of course, all your favorite podcast platforms, which you probably already found because you're listening to the show at the moment. We have a Discord channel. You can check us out there, which I believe, if I remember correctly, is if you go to OmegaMetroid.com, which you totally should, you'll be able to join the Discord right there as well. So make sure you check us out at OmegaMetroid.com. We're updating the site pretty much almost, if not every weekday, with Metroid and Metroidvania news, fan creation news, and so much more. We just posted about the latest Kiwi Talks interview. We've been posting about recent Metroidvania news, everything that's coming out recently. By the way, John Cena, a big Metroid fan apparently, and was very excited about Metroid Dread. How cool is that? I was talking about if we get a Metroid Direct, let's get John Cena on there. Let's get this guy in there. But yeah, thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great time chilling with y'all and talking some Metroid. Hope to talk to you next week. Hopefully we get some Metroid news soon. We hope you enjoyed the Partner Direct, which will be out by the time this airs. Tell a friend, maybe tell a fan too, but tell a friend in your life about Metroid, about OmegaMetroid.com, about the Omega Metroid podcast. And you can join us on Discord if you ever have any comments, some critiques, anything about the show, what you'd like to see us improve or talk about or whatever. And we always like to hear from you because we like talking Metroid and we like having y'all listen. So thank you so much for coming through. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the Omega Metroid podcast. Have a good one. With no bait, kid your boy hold weight. I got my soul straight. I brush your mouth like Colgate. In any weather, I'm never better. Your boy's so hot, you never catch me in the next man's sweater. If they hate, let them hate. I drop your whole clan. Lay your ass down for the 3-second tan. Your time is up, my time is now. You can't see me, my time is now. It's the franchise where I'm shining now. You can't see me, my time is now. It's gonna be what it's gonna be. 5
pounds of courage, buddy, base, 10 pants with a gold tee. It's a war dance, a victory step. A raw stance is a gift, and you insist it's my rep. John Cena trademark, y'all are so-so. And talk about the bread you make, but don't know the recipe for dough. Aiming guns in all your photos, that's a no-no. When this pop, your lip lock, your big talks are blatant no-so. See what happens when the ice age melt. You see, monetary status is not what matters, but it helps. I'm rocking Timepiece by Benny, if any. The same reason y'all could love me is the same reason y'all condemn me. A man's measured by the way that he thinks, not clothing lines, ice links, leather and minks. I spent 20 plus years seeking knowledge of self. So for now, Mark Breck is living life for wealth.
Your time is